All right, so we will go ahead and get started as Nico pulls up our slideshow. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Train the Advocate 103, the Death Deck. My name is Leslie Chinchilla, and I am the Senior States Advocacy Organizer for Compassion and Choices. And today we have a very special guest, Lisa Paul, who is the co-creator for the Death Deck and the End of Life Deck. So the goal of Train the Advocate is to help advocates feel a little more comfortable having meaningful conversations, learn how to present to their communities about end-of-life care options, and grow the movement. Today, we're going to be offering multiple Train the Advocates throughout the year, and we hope that you can join us for all of those as well. If you ever want to give a presentation, we do have pre-made slideshows that you can use depending on the audience and the topic. So today we're going to be playing, like I said, the Death Deck, which is a card game with questions you've never asked and answers you never knew about the people closest to you. You will learn how this resource can be helpful to your loved ones, friends, and community in having conversations about their values, priorities, and beliefs around end of life that may be less commonly discussed, but equally as important. So today we'll be speaking to you as the presenters in the same way that we hope you will present in the future. So first, we're going to go over some ground rules. Then we're going to give a brief presentation, and we're actually going to break out into breakout rooms for about 25 minutes to actually play the game. So it's going to be a very engaging webinar that we hope you're going to enjoy. And also after the presentation, we do have a brief survey that we hope that you can answer, and it could be completely anonymous. Next slide. So throughout the presentation, we do just ask you to remain on mute so there's no background noise, and also just silence your phones so there's no distractions. But most importantly, we do hope that you enjoy this presentation and that it does lead to meaningful conversations. Next slide. So quickly, I just want to go over our group agreements. So we do ask everyone to use I statements to speak from your point of view. So life happens as well, but please try to minimize distractions. We also ask for you to build upon, try not to repeat, and move up, move back, allowing everyone equal airtime. Next slide. And I do want to give, with this wonderful little image, a big shout out to our volunteers. We have a few volunteers who are going to be moderating these breakout rooms for us. So thank you all for taking the time to do this. Next slide. So as we've done in other Train the Advocates, we're just going to quickly go over our mission statement. So Compassion and Choices is the nation's oldest, largest, and most active nonprofit working to improve care, expand options, and empower everyone to chart their own end-of-life journey. We believe in patient-directed healthcare, where patients should have the ultimate choice of choosing treatments that align with their individual priorities. Patients and healthcare professionals should work as a team. Next slide. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our very special guest, Lisa Paul.
Well, thank you, Leslie. I am so happy to be here today. I'm a huge believer in compassion and choices and end-of-life options. And so I love every opportunity I have to collaborate with all of you wonderful folks and greatly appreciate the advocacy work that everyone is doing who's showing up for us today. So we'll go ahead and get started in a little bit of an introduction into, we have two products actually that I'm going to talk about today, but we'll be playing the Death Deck, but I'll let you know a little bit about our other resource as well. Next slide. So just a little bit about me. You might wonder, why are we listening to Lisa talk today? I do come from small northern Michigan roots on a farm, and I went to University of Michigan and got my master's degree in social work. I've been practicing as a social worker since that time. I have 21 years living in Los Angeles, 17 years working in hospice, and 7 years working as an ER social worker. And in all settings, in every aspect of my life, I have seen that we aren't having these important conversations about death, dying, end-of-life preferences. And I'm passionate about helping people begin these conversations. Next slide. So how did we create the death deck? You see this beautiful family here, this young family. Early on in my hospice career, I knocked on the door of Joe and Lori LoCicero's home. Their kids were a little bit older. Dalton was 5 and Garcia was 2.5. And Joe had pancreatic cancer. He was diagnosed at 43, and at his time of diagnosis, he did what many young people with a young family do, which is he was determined to be the exception and survive this very difficult diagnosis. Unfortunately, that was not the case. And because he had such a fighting mentality, he and Lori didn't talk about what might happen if he wasn't cured. They didn't talk about any of his end of life preferences. They didn't acknowledge that he might die. And so there were a lot of questions that Lori had in trying to provide care for Joe. Next slide. Probably the biggest question that Lori had was, how alert did Joe want to be as he was dying? So people often at end of life have a transitioning process where their body is starting to die. We call it transitioning. It's typically lasts between a day to a couple of weeks. Joe, being really young, was on the long end of that. He was pretty much dying from the time of his hospice admission. And what that meant was he was confused. He was not really able to communicate his needs and preferences and wishes. He was altered and a little agitated. And the question that became was, how medicated would Joe want to be? Lori felt that dying was a spiritual experience, and she thought that Joe would want to be pretty present based on what she knew about him. Joe's parents were also there, and they felt like what he was exhibiting was distress or discomfort, and they wanted all medication used. So there was some tension and difficulty surrounding how much medication. Next slide. Another big topic that was present for Joe and Lori and many people is, how did Joe feel about visitors as he was dying? Would he want his parents and siblings and close friends there in addition to Lori and the kids? Did he want a house full of visitors? Or did he want this to be a private and personal experience and to limit visitors? Next slide. And then what did he want to hear? Again, there were assumptions made about what Joe's preferences would be, and Lori just wished that she knew. She thought he would prefer some meditation music. His family thought he would prefer background of TV and some other things that their family had shared. And so there were just a lot of questions and lots of opinions, but none of them were Joe's. Next slide. And then the kids, these children were really young, and different family members had different opinions about how involved the children should be. And Lori just really wished that she had talked to Joe about it, and so she could support his wishes and be more clear in what he would want. Next slide. So after I provided support to Lori and Joe, and Joe passed, and then I provided bereavement support to Lori, she reached out a couple of years later, told me she was writing a book, and we got together and started talking. And we realized that both of us felt similarly that there's so many missed opportunities for people to have conversations about what people want as they're dying. And we wanted to try to do something about that. Lori wished that she had had these conversations with Joe. She was second guessing in her grief if she had made the right decisions, if she had honored him. And so we decided we were going to create a game to help people have these conversations before a medical crisis and before a terminal diagnosis. Next slide. So we created the Death Deck. So this is our first product. We created this in 2018. It's 112 questions, 80 multiple choice and 32 open-ended. We use humor and multiple choice questions to make it more approachable, and it's supposed to be a little fun. You know, we added the multiple choice questions to try to make it easier. We know this is a topic that's difficult to talk about, and we wanted to give people options of where they can align themselves. You might find yourself in the breakout rooms saying, oh, none of these apply to me. And that's great too. They don't have to apply to you. You can say D, or you can say all of the above. You can come up with your own answers. We have just found that that it's easier when we have some options. It gives us some starting points to think about. So don't be afraid of answering D as well. And then in our death deck, we have questions that are general thoughts related to death and dying, like can mediums communicate with the dead? And then we have personal beliefs and desires. And then we have death preparation and advanced care planning. So about 30 to 50% of the deck are really on preparation and advanced care planning, tools to help people have these conversations. And then some are more whimsical and just about death in general. And the real idea about this is that when people don't practice talking about death and dying, and end of life preferences, it's very hard to do it when you're faced with a situation in which it has to be discussed. And so we really want to give people opportunities to practice having these conversations and to bring up topics that they may not have thought about, and begin having these conversations with friends and family members, and begin thinking about their own wishes. And then of course, taking action, doing advanced care planning, making their wishes known. And the death deck is for when death seems far away. So this is because we use you know, our skull here, and we use the word death in the title. It's meant to lighten up the topic, but it is not necessarily for when people are at the very end of their life. That is for our next product that I'm going to talk about. But I will say that some people closer to death do appreciate and enjoy the death deck. I have played it with them, but you have to know your audience and use your discrimination on that. But what we found was, while the death deck is being used in all these settings with advanced care planning and all these different types of communication, we wanted to create something that was more specifically for people with serious illness and advanced age where death was closer, and that's our EOL deck. Next slide. Oh, sorry. I'm giving you a head start. You already know about the EOL deck. Okay, so this is an example, and you'll be in your breakout rooms and getting more examples. But this is an example of our death deck. This is an advanced care planning question, as you can tell. Would there be differences in how your family members would treat your medical condition if you couldn't speak for yourself? A, no, I've been very clear with my instructions. B, they would argue but ultimately agree. And C, yes, they struggle with choosing a restaurant. So when I have the opportunity to play the death deck in groups and in different settings, like you all might do at some point as advocates, any of these questions can be turned into follow-up discussions about advanced care planning, right? So in this case, if someone answers C, yes, they struggle with choosing a restaurant, well, you really should have an advanced healthcare directive. Well, we all should, right? We know that. But this is an example of an area to highlight that if your family members would struggle with choosing a restaurant and you acknowledge that you know that they would treat different family members, that family members would want to treat you differently, treat your medical condition differently, then you really want to make sure that an advanced directive is in place. So it provides opportunities for those of us who facilitate these conversations to provide further education and suggestions and guidance about, okay, this is your answer, and now here's some things you can do about that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here we are. Now we're at the EOL doc. As I mentioned, this is designed for people in their final chapter of life. We use, you can see it has a little koala on it instead of our skull, and it says EOL. So EOL stands for end of life deck. And again, this is for those with life-limiting diagnoses, hospice, palliative care patients, people of advanced age. And we just have softened up. We have, we still use multiple choice and a casual tone like the Death Deck, but we use softer language and images. We don't have as much sassiness in the EOL deck as we do in the Death Deck. It's more respectful for the people, the intended audience of it. And the questions are more specifically related to end-of-life preferences rather than a wide range of death-related topics, and also legacy building. So the EOL deck is really trying to help people as they're approaching the end of their lives articulate their wishes. So again, this is for when death seems to be sooner. Next slide. So this is a card that I usually start with when I'm utilizing the EOL deck with my hospice patients. How direct would you like medical professionals to be when explaining disease progression and the dying process? Oh. Hold, please.
Nico, you can, yeah, go ahead and share it again.
There we go. A, tell it like it is, all of it. B, be direct with family, but gentler with me. Or C, stick with the basics. I'd like to keep it a mystery. So usually when I'm using the EOL deck, I start with this question or I start with a legacy question because people tend to have an easier time talking about their life achievements, how they want to be remembered, more easily than their end of life preferences. Let's see, next slide. Okay, so before we go in the breakout rooms, I know that you're going to be led by some wonderful volunteers who are going to talk with you about the questions. I would love for people to be thinking about, as you're answering these questions, if there's any that really resonate with you, if there's anything that prompts you to want to talk to your family about it, if you have any feedback for me. We'll come back together as a group and we'll have opportunities to share together in that setting. And that's it from me.
Yeah, so Nico, you can go ahead and put breakout rooms. I know there was a question if you need the actual death deck. Our volunteers will have it up and they'll be asking, so you don't need it to participate. But yeah, Nico, you can go ahead and break us out into our rooms. I think we're having a little bit of trouble, but we'll give, when everything's ready, you should get a little prompt that says to join a room. And then you can just click join room and you should be teleported magically to that room.
Have we heard how we can get a death deck?
Yeah, so we'll share the website after in the follow-up email where you can get your own deck if you want one. So that'll be in the follow-up.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome back, everyone. We're just waiting for everyone to make their way back to the main session. Sorry about that. I know there was a group that didn't have a leader for a bit, so I was trying to move folks around. So thank you for your patience and understanding. Okay,
Does it look like we have everybody back?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for participating in these conversations. I hope there was some meaningful dialogue and some things that maybe you haven't thought about before, or just some different perspectives from the members in your group. I would love if anyone has any insights to share. We're looking, you're welcome to unmute yourself and participate that way. You can also participate in the chat. Kathy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was a great opportunity. So thank you. We'd love more time. So if we're ever doing this in the future, I'd like more time on the breakout. But what I found, well, everything was very interesting. But one thing in particular, and I asked Patricia in our group if she would mind sharing about the DNR bracelet that she wears all the time. So are you still with us, Patricia? I'm looking
Sorry,
for Patricia. Okay.
Okay, I couldn't get myself unmuted, sorry.
Oh, there you are. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Go ahead.
Well, I live in the state of Wisconsin, and here you have to have a physician discussion about death, and then the physician has to agree to sign a paper that allows you to get a DNR bracelet that you wear all the time. Because if you have an accident out somewhere, of course, all of your living will stuff is somewhere else, and they're going to resuscitate you. So it's really important that if you are serious about not wanting CPR or being vented or any of that stuff, that you get your bracelet.
And I believe that each state has different regulations around that.
Yes.
You know, a POLST or a MOLST is also a document that is required as a physician order that people can state their preferences, including DNR. But I love Patricia or Patrice?
Patrice.
I love that you that in Wisconsin that's an option for you, and that you can wear that. And hopefully you've also let everyone know in your family, just in case.
Oh yeah,
That's an important piece. Yeah.
Yeah, I do the Conversation Project from Ellen Goodman. You've probably
Wonderful.
heard of that.
Yeah.
And I did that like 10 years ago. Everybody in my family got a copy of it. But this is the only thing that will guarantee that if I live in a retirement community and they call 911 here all the time, and even if you have it on your refrigerator, if you're in a crisis situation and I were in the dining room, that paperwork does no good. I have to have that bracelet so that the EMS sees it and knows what to do.
Can you tell us where we can get one, or is is there a
I- I-
website for
Again,
the DNR bracelet?
what she was saying about every state is different. So in Wisconsin is all I can really speak to, but there's only one place in Wisconsin where you can order the bracelet. You have to have that form signed by the physician in order to get it. It has my name printed on the back. And I think other states have similar things, but I can only speak to Wisconsin.
Well, maybe Lisa, you can look into that and send us all something that tells us where we can get it from different states.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I or Leslie can look into that and follow up with you about that.
Okay, Nico.
I really appreciate the concept of the bracelet being brought forward. When I was a social worker out in California, they had rolled out Pulse at that time. And now I'm in Kansas and they have T-Pop. However, those types of forms, although they're very useful for certain things, they depend upon having an MD, their physician's orders. And so when I was traveling, for instance, from California to Kansas, I filled out one and kept it in my truck, just at least to show intention, but it had absolutely no legal status. And plus it's not standardized from state to state either. So I really, I'm looking forward to learning more about the medic bracelet idea. Thank you.
Can I jump in while we're on this topic quickly, or are you trying to close up?
Well, I think that Compassionate Choices will help provide some information on the topic. If we can come back to other
Sure.
topics that were discussed, we only have 3 minutes.
Got it.
Allison, do you have something to add? Or maybe she left. Does anyone else want to chime in about something that came out of their group discussion that was meaningful or something you're going to follow up on?
Our group,
Megan?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, someone has their I see Megan has their hand up, and then Elizabeth Stern, I think, was speaking, and then we can go after.
Thank you. Something that came up as we looked at in breakout 9, as we looked at each card, was there was a lot of maybe it's multiple, maybe it's dependent on the scenario and how great the options are as being a thought starter to think about the different circumstances that could come up, and it's not necessarily one or the other, but it really does start a really great thought process around scenarios and what you may or may want at different times in life.
Yes, thank you. I think it is a starting point, and we love D answers, and your answers are going to change over time. How you answer today may be different in 5 years or in different circumstances. I think it was Elizabeth.
Okay. I guess I just piggyback on the same response that we just heard. I did see the humor, which was, I thought interesting. We didn't use the word humor in our breakout group, but it was definitely there. And also the intent to just have conversations. Very rarely out of the, I think 7 or so questions that we sampled, was it unanimous, except for one obvious one. But the stimulation of conversation was quite evident. Other than that, it was a lot of detail that I'm sure was covered in the other groups as well.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think we had one more person that was trying to speak earlier.
Arinda?
Yes. Lisa, thank you so much. I've had my deck for a long time, and this is so great to see it in action. What is your recommendation, though, for best practice? If you have a larger group, would you recommend that to make smaller groups, and then do you divide the cards so that there are from every category in every group? What would you recommend how to really get this best practice using the deck.
Yes, definitely. I do have a flyer that I can send to Leslie for everyone to get dispersed to the group. But similar to what we did today is what I would recommend. The small group discussions gives people an opportunity to really get into the material and have meaningful conversations. When we try to do it in too large of a setting, I find that, you know, it's just a couple voices that get heard. And so I would encourage small groups. You know, oh, I should have it. Let me see if I have it right here. I actually break up the decks and put them on these little rings.
Oh,
And all you do is you just use the hole puncher and you put them on, and you can make them in any combination. Sometimes I've included some EOL and some Death Deck. So, or I just try to get a representative sample from the card, and then that way each group has one of these. It also makes it easier to collect at the end of these group activities.
It's a great idea.
And then I think Leslie we'll make sure you also have my email. You can reach out at thedeathdeck.com as well, but I'm happy to provide further conversations about how to utilize it and all of those things. I know we're out of time.
Can we hear from Hans before though? If there's one hand up, I don't mind waiting for another minute.
Yeah, Hans, you can go ahead.
It's a real quickie. In Utah, you can put on your driving license a little tag for organ donation. Is there anything in the country that allows you to indicate a DNR as well? Anyone have got ideas?
Not on the license, not on your license.
Okay.
No.
Thanks.
Yeah, and before we go again, I just want to thank you, Lisa, again for taking the time to do this. And to our volunteers as well for moderating these groups, Nico as well for getting the breakout rooms going. So yeah, we'll send a follow-up email that will have the link to any questions that maybe weren't answered, and a link to purchase a deck if you want it as well, and the recording. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me. We have some upcoming events that I'll share in the email as well, but we have another 2 Train the Advocates. Next slide, Nico, just really quickly. Yeah, again, thank you, Lisa, for taking the time. And I believe that's it. But yeah, and as always, Compassion Choices is funded almost exclusively by individual donors. So if you are interested, you can to make a donation, you can do so at compassionchoices.org/donate. But again, thank you all for participating in these breakout rooms and taking the time today. And I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. Take care,
Hold on,
everyone.
Leslie, just a second.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, thank you everyone for showing up. Also, I put in the chat, and I believe they'll send it out in the email, but we do have a discount code for Compassion and Choices today. So it's Choices 20. So the word choices and then 20 after that. You can use that at thedeathdeck.com. And you can use that on any product, so it's good on both of them. And if you have any problems with that, reach out to us at thedeathdeck.com. There's an inquiry form. You can reach out there. And I'll make sure Leslie has the information to email me directly as well. So thank you, everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Everyone.